Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiro Vanachari Yamuna Tiro Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jai Paramansa Paribhajaracharya Sukhareshwara Samavati Vitam Saraswati Jai Nanda Gori Vaishnava Ki Jai Ramacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Names of the whole Sri Krishna Sri Radha Krishna Gopala Sam Kanda Radha Nagari Nagari Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Guru Bhata Dham Ki Jai Swami Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to that. All glories to that. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Hope all of you can hear me and see my screen. Hope all of you are doing well in all respects. We'll get started. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So continue with our discussion on Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, titled Transcendental Knowledge. We completed through verse number 22 in the last class. We'll do a quick recap. Yeah, so far in the discussion between Krishna and Arjuna, the theme of conversation is Krishna is elaborating on how one can perform action in Krishna consciousness. First giving him confidence that, well, in the past, many liberated souls have acted with the proper understanding that Krishna, his birth and activities are divine, they are not ordinary. Having understood that, they have acted in spiritual consciousness and they have performed their duty. and they have achieved perfection. And Arjuna, you can also do that. Then he explains the intricacies of what action and inaction is, because that is what Arjuna's confusion is. Arjuna is not sure what he should do. The Kshatriya, he knows that he's supposed to perform his duty and fight, but he's bewildered. And so we had this discussion about action in inaction and then inaction in action. So ultimately, it depends on the consciousness or the knowledge under which one is acting, right? So this knowledge is compared to that fire, which can burn all kind of fruitive reactions. Just like fire can consume any kind of fuel, work performed in knowledge, prescribed duties performed in proper knowledge, proper understanding of who the beneficiary of all those activities are. Um, one is liberated for any kind of implications or reactions. Does not get implicated in the reactions of the work. So in this way, such a self-realized soul performs no fruitive action, although the individual might be engaged in various kind of undertakings. So such a person engages one's gross body and subtle body, mind and intelligence. Subtle body is perfectly controlled and gives up the proprietorship of over one's possessions, and is uh, simply interested in having bare necessities for life. Uh, and then he's satisfied with the gains which come on its own accord. So we talked about Ajgar Vritti, right? The Vritti of a python who is self-satisfied, does not travel long distances to hunt the prey. Whenever the prey comes in one's vicinity, then it would attack the prey and then consume it, and then be satisfied for you know with that until some point in future when another prey might come. So we can also um, apply that same principle in our life, Ajgar Vritti, and be satisfied. So one who is free from duality, such a person is free from duality, does not envy anyone, and is steady in both success and failure. Such a individual is never entangled, although performing all kind of actions. So that was verse number 22. We'll continue with verse 23 today. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Text 23. Gata Sangasya Muktasya Jnanavasthitachetasah Yajnaya Charatah Karma Samagram Praviliyate. The work of a man, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Sri Ishi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully satisfied in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. So here's an interesting concept. Have we discussed about the modes of material nature with some detail in the past? Do you recall that, Maulik? Modes of material nature refer to the three modes: sat, goodness, passion, and ignorance.
Yeah.
Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Have we discussed
Sattva,
that?
Rajas, and Tamas. Yeah.
Maybe it will be
Yeah.
discussed. Okay. So here it is described that a person who is not attached to the modes of material nature is self-satisfied in transcendental knowledge. Work of such a person also does not yield any reactions. It merges entirely into transcendence. There's a lot to unpack over here. So gata sangasya. Gata. Sangasya is attachment. Muktasya, those who are liberated. Jnana avasthita, situated in knowledge. Chetasaha, those who are wise. Yajnaya, yajna means satisfaction of Krishna. Because yajna is one of the names of Krishna. Who is acting acharataha karma samagrama in total praviliyate. So in this, just like in a digital world, everything is uh, in binary mode, right? Everything is zeros and one. So the operating system is made up of zeros and ones. On the operating system, there are many programs or applications which are run. These applications are also made in zeros and ones. These applications consume data. Could be text, could be picture, could be audio, video. Uh, so the data consumed or processed by the application is also zeros and ones. Similarly, so in this way, the digital world is binary. Similarly, Krishna's creation is ternary. Hmm. Everything that you see in this world is a combination of the three modes of material nature. So when you talk about operating system, similarly, Krishna created the basic elements, the primary creation of the 24 elements, which we have discussed at length in the past. Those are made up of the three modes of nature. You know how I described that the first creation that happens is that of mind, intelligence, and contaminated consciousness. Mm. So when the ego combines with goodness, it creates mind. When ego combines with passion, it creates intelligence. Ego, when it combines with ignorance, uh, it creates contaminated consciousness. From mind, the five sense objects are developed, which is smell, taste, form, touch, and the sound. From intelligence, the 10 senses are created, five working senses and five knowledge acquiring senses. And from the contaminated consciousness, which is in the mode of ignorance, which was created in the mode of ignorance, the five gross elements are created, which is earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So in this way, the 24 elements, which are the basic ingredients, they are all creation from three modes of nature. And all the species that they exist in the world, they are also in the three modes of nature. Any kind of work that we do is also under the three modes of nature. So given this example where charity can also be in three modes of nature. Austerity can be in the three modes of nature. Any kind of work that we do is could be a combination of the three modes of nature. Just like charity that is given to a worthy person, one person who is say self-realized, or person who is not endeavoring a lot to maintain one's body but is self-realized. So traditionally Brahmanas, it's modern age difficult to find genuine Brahmanas, but if you find a genuine Brahmana, one who is self-realized, is imparting spiritual instructions, or the charity given to such a person is purifying, that is in the mode of goodness. Charity given with some results expected in return, like political contributions, right? So many businessmen, they want political favors from powerful people, so they do contributions to their campaign, right? So that is in the mode of passion, right? So that is also charity, but it's a mode of passion. And then contributions done to those who are evil-minded. So there are a lot of, for instance, terrorist organizations. So they also need funding, and people under the name of religion or whatever might uh, collect funds. And so charitable contributions done to such individuals are in the mode of ignorance. Tamogun. So sattva, raja, tama. It pervades everything. Suppose kind of food that we eat could be in the mode of goodness, passion, ignorance. Fasting can also be in the mode of three modes, right? So fasting that is done according to scriptural injunctions. One that is purifying, that is fasting in the mode of goodness. Fasting done for political reasons. What they say, and until one's demands are not fulfilled, one will fast until death. That is fasting in the mode of passion. And then fasting without any consideration of just whimsically, out of ignorance, depression, uh, that is does not help the spirit, does not help to get any kind of material gain, but is actually harmful to the body. Is fasting in the mode of ignorance. So in this way, the three modes pervades everything, and they lead to. So there is cause and effect in this world. When we see activities, they manifest as chain reaction, right? There is a certain cause which leads to effect, and that effect becomes the cause of a secondary effect, right? And then that effect again becomes a cause of something else. So in this way, it's a chain reaction of activities that come about. So here it says that one actually who is acting in knowledge is not uh, affected by the three modes of nature, does not let the three modes of nature drive one's life and one's activities. So, and such a person is satisfied in the transcendental situation, acting in transcendental knowledge, and that all that work does not lead to really any reactions, and it's completely spiritual. So here transcendence means something that transcends. So what are we trying to transcend? uh, we're trying to transcend the three modes of nature. Hmm. Here he says it merges into transcendence because that work is not attached to the three modes of nature. That means it transcends the three modes of nature. So when we say transcendental, means something that transcends. What are we transcending? The three modes of nature. Because the three modes of nature are very difficult to transcend. It pervades everything. Just like if you are in a digital world and then you say, well, I want to transcend the binary, uh, the what do you call the influence of the binary configuration. Well, in the digital world, the operating system is made up of zeros, one. The programs that run on it are made up of zeros and ones. And then the data that is consumed by the program, images, files, text, video, audio, all of that is also zeros and ones. So it's very difficult. As long as one is in that digital world, you cannot transcend zeros and one. So similarly, in the ternary world, Krishna's creation is ternary. Everything is made up of three modes of nature. That is the basic ingredients: goodness, passion, and ignorance, including our body, our activities, the things that we do. The entire body is made up of three modes. Kapha, Pitta, Vayu. Kapha is in the ignorance, Pitta is passion, and Vayu is goodness. The activities that we do are under the modes of nature. The things that we use, right? The instruments that we use are made up of three modes. So in this world, it's very difficult to transcend the three modes. Krishna says, Devi hi esha gunamai. Mama Maya Duratyaya. So Mama Maya, this whole world is creation of Prakriti or Maya. And how is this Maya? Krishna said, Devi Esha Gunamai. This Maya is actually divine. Why is it divine? Because it's Krishna's creation. Everything that Krishna does is divine. And Gunamai. Guna means three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Gunamai. That means it is filled with the three modes of nature. Mama Maya Duratyaya. And he says very difficult to Duratyaya, very difficult to transcend. Dura means something that is far, beyond reach, difficult to achieve. But what is the solution? Mameva prapadyante maya metam tarantite. So mameva prapadyante. Mam means Krishna is referring to himself. He says, one who surrenders unto me, prapadyante. Maya metam tarantite. Taranti means to, a lot of English language has the word tara, means to swim across. This world is compared to an ocean of nations, ignorance. So one can easily cross over this ocean of nation when he surrendered to Krishna, right? is acting on that platform. So this is what the verse is trying to say. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is freed from the dualities. Dvandva mohena bharata. This world is full of dvandva, dualities. The mind is constantly accepting and then rejecting. Uh, so attachment and renunciation, they are two opposite sides of the same coin, right? One might be very attached to something, and when one is frustrated, he wants to reject it. That is artificial renunciation. Like if you see how the work is structured, right? We work 5 days a week, and then 2 days is off, right? Or why would you think corporations would give you this 2 days off? Because it allows us to unwind and relax so that we can again work. So if it is continuous, then it's very difficult to sustain. So there's dualities. So you work 5 days, and then there is renunciation of work for the weekend. Heat and cold, honor, dishonor. So the entire world is full of dualities. So one has to overcome dualities, happiness, distress, in the sense that one does not let oneself super excited and super happy when things are favorable, and so then one automatically does not feel miserable when things are bad, right? So you have to kind of limit the amplitude of that wave. As I was explaining, you have the crest and the trough. The higher the crest, right, the height of the crest, the bigger it is, the bigger would be the depth of the trough. So if we are able to tolerate happiness, we can tolerate distress also. In this way, one is free from contamination of the three modes of nature. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, right? So in the beginning of this whole conversation was Krishna explaining that his birth and activities are divine. From an external perspective, it might appear, well, yet Krishna is just like us. But then we discussed at length how his birth and activities are not ordinary. So having understood that, one acts on that platform. It's just not theoretical understanding, but one sees that oh, here is someone who is completely spiritual, uh, and I can also imbibe that spiritual nature. So when we act based on Krishna's instructions, like the one that he's giving to Arjuna right now, we also acquire that spiritual nature, just like an iron, which is cold and solid by its nature. When it comes in contact with fire, it becomes red hot iron and fiery in its nature. Similarly, the spirit soul, which is covered by matter, which is cold and dark, when it comes in contact with spiritual consciousness, then the soul revives its spiritual nature. It's already there, its nature is there, but then it is suppressed. The verse that we had discussed in the past, there are three layers of covering. Just like an embryo is covered by the womb, or fire is covered by smoke, or the glass is covered by dust. Similarly, the spirit soul is covered by different levels of ignorance. So the embryo covered by the womb is in that analogy that Bhagavad Gita states, embryo covered by the womb is the highest level of ignorance. The embryo in the womb cannot see, cannot feel anything. It's complete, does not know what's going on. Uh, then the next little less uh, extent of covering is that of fire covered by smoke. Because you can still see the fire, though there is smoke that is covering it. The fire is still perceived. And then mirror on the dust is also much lighter covering. You can easily remove that dust, right? So when one mind is situated properly, one knows what is one's constitutional position. That means one has overcome ignorance. Then one acts in that proper consciousness, and one is not implicated in the reactions. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Krishna is the source of Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices. So whatever that self-realized person does, he is only doing for the satisfaction of Krishna or Vishnu, whose another name is Yajna. Yajna is another name of Krishna, is also the personality of Yajna. And he's done everything for the satisfaction of Vishnu as a sacrifice. Then there are no implications. Just like the other example that is given in the scriptures, is that fire, in the fire you can put any kind of fuel. Some fuels, there are different gradations or purity levels of fuel, just like when we do fractional distillation of crude oil, right? There are so many different kind of fuels that come. At the bottom is tar, and the topmost level of distillation is the jet fuel. It requires to be much more refined, and in which after that you have, petrol, diesel, kerosene, right? There's so many different gradations of fuel. Similarly, wood, traditionally when they use wood, there are different, some kind of wood, they are easily combustible. Some of them are not fully combustible. But when you put into fire, ultimately the fire that is produced, right, that fire has the same quality. It's the same, provides the same heat and light. You cannot say that the fire from one kind of fuel provides a different kind of heat. The heat provided is same. The efficiency might be different. Something that is more higher, has a higher level of purification. You might get a higher yield in energy, but that energy, when it comes out, it's of the same quality. So the fire consumes all kind of fuel. Similarly, work performed in Krishna consciousness consumes all kind of work of lower gradations or higher gradations from material perspective. Uh, it consumes means that there are no reactions, regardless of the gradation of the work. So the resultant actions to all such work certainly merges into transcendence and does not suffer material effects. So this will be elaborated more in the next verse, and then in subsequent verses we'll talk about what are different kind of sacrifices. Generally we think of sacrifices as uh, dravya or substances offered in the fire. That's one kind of sacrifices, but there are so many other kind of sacrifices um, that will be discussed in the subsequent verses. Any questions on this particular verse? Verse number 23. Okay.
Jamin bhai, you said about charity. Uh,
Yeah.
so, and then you find that there are three types of charity. So, and then you said that the charity should be done to brahmanas. That's what is written in the scripture. But now, these days, as you also mentioned that these days you don't find the brahmanas who are real. So, uh, what is the right type of charity should be done? In general.
Yeah, generally, first thing is, um, of course, those who are needy and poor, you can give to them also. That is one of the duties or social responsibilities of the grihasthas. Traditionally in the villages, when a grihastha in the Vedic culture would go out before the meal and ask if anyone is hungry, right? And he would feed them first, and then would honor one's own meal. So, also we discussed last time, charity should never be given up. So those who are needy and poor, we should definitely be charitable to them. The best thing, again, is to, instead of giving them money, uh, give things like, clothes. There could be food that could be given to them. Higher than that is the charity of knowledge. If you are able to give them even material, some sort of knowledge by which they can find some employment and able to maintain themselves, that is better. And then the charity could be even better than that is spiritual knowledge. that can be imparted. So yeah, let's talk about first the material kind of charity. Yes, some charity that should be given to everyone. That also purifies us, right? So charity given to needy is also a purificator, even if that person is not Brahmana. Mm. But if one is able to find a genuine Brahmana, then one should give to them also. But otherwise, you can give charity to those who are poor. The reason I said not to give money is sometimes you don't know how that money will be used, right? Like here, in the Western world, sometimes they give money to them and they might buy drugs, right, or alcohol, uh, or in some of the Asian countries, like in India, you will find there are professional beggars who are exploited by the underworld. So then you don't know what's happening with that money. So better give food, clothes instead of giving money. That's one way to approach it. And you can contribute to projects which are spiritual in nature. If those who um, suppose you could sponsor Bhagavad Gitas, and if you know, also you do your due diligence. Sometimes in the name of religion, people collect money with ulterior motives, but if you really trust that person and you know that they are collecting for the spiritual project and they are really going to use for that purpose, uh, and you trust how the funds would be handled, and then you could give to institutions also who would use for the right cause. So these are some of the options that you can pursue. Is it good enough?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, verse 24. It's one of the lesser known verses, but it's still very important. We're going to go over some important concepts. Verse 24. ब्रह्मार्पणं ब्रह्महवीर् ब्रह्माग्नो ब्रह्मणाहुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यं ब्रह्मकर्म समाधिना. Person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So there's a lot to unpack over here. So the word Brahma appears at least once in each line, and first line appears twice. So the word Brahma means spirit, something that is spiritual in nature. That's why it's translated over here, Brahma. And from the same root, there are a lot of words that come, like Brahma, which is who is the first born living entity in this world, who is born out of the navel of Vishnu. He embodies the truth, right? And so he's known as Brahma. Is the first creation. And Brahmana, Brahma Janati iti Brahmana. When you say Brahmana, what does Brahmana means? Brahma Janati iti Brahmana. One who knows Brahma or one who knows absolute truth is Brahmana. Not that somebody is born in a Brahmana family and they say, I'm a Brahmana. Brahmana means one who knows the absolute truth. That person. What is the absolute truth? Right? It cannot, at least at the bare minimum, can tell what is matter, what is spirit, and is acting on that platform. Meaning, one is not interested. One is practices Ajgar Vritti. Brahmanas basically teach, and they are sustained by whatever charity they might receive. They don't have an employment like the Sudras, or they don't engage in business like the Vaishyas, or they don't collect taxes like the Kshatriyas, but they maintain themselves by receiving charitable contributions. Then one is a Brahmana, is acting on that platform. So Brahma Arpanam, Brahma Havir. So when we do any kind of yajna, traditionally, you would have fire. In the fire, we offer different dravyas, which is anna, different havan samagri. So the havi, the butter, which is clarified butter specifically, the ghee. So that when a sacrifice is performed, the essence of this verse is that when a sacrifice is performed by someone who is self-realized, everything is spiritual. The person is situated in spiritual transcendence. The fire which consumes the dravya offered to it is spiritual by nature. The fuel, havi, that is also spiritual in nature. Right? Just like the activities of a person in material consciousness, everything is material. The substance that they are using is material. Their consciousness is material. The outcome is material. On the other side, one who is completely situated in proper consciousness, everything is spiritual. So Brahma Arpanam, but he has proper consciousness. He doesn't think, oh, this is just a fire and I'm offering something in the fire. He sees this fire represents the tongue of Vishnu. The Havan Kund represents the mouth of Vishnu. So the Vishnu manifests himself in the form of the fire and consumes the oblations offered to it in it. So the Havi is the butter is spirit. What is being off the Brahma Arpanam, the contribution, the dravyas which are offered are also spirit. It does not remain ordinary matter. The fire which is produced out of Havi is also spiritual in nature. And who is offering? The Brahmana is offering, or here meaning the self-realized soul is offering. What is the destination? Brahma. The ultimate destination of such a person is also Brahma. Brahma eva tena gantavyam achieves that because one's activities are also spiritual. Brahma karma samadhina. Samadhi means complete absorption. There is no other motivation except for satisfaction of Vishnu. So your play of the word Brahma appears in so many different contexts. Brahma Arpanam, the offering is spiritual. Brahma Havi, the fuel is spiritual. Brahma Agno, the fire is spiritual. The person who is offering is spiritual, Brahmana. The destination one achieves out of those sacrifice, Brahmeva tena gantavyam, that is also spiritual nature. And for such a person, all their activities are also spiritual in nature. So that's what Krishna is saying. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions how activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness. All of them will be described in the following verses. Yeah, subsequent verses will tell exactly how brahmachari, how a grihastha performs sacrifices, how a vanprastha performs sacrifices. What are different kind of sacrifices? In each of these sacrifices, the fire is not the literal fire. Fire would be, for instance, fire could be restraint of the mind, and the dravya which is offered in the fire could be the desires. So when one man offers one's desires as a substance in the fire of self-restraint, is not indulging in sense gratification in other way, is also a sacrifice. So we'll go over all the different kind of sacrifices. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. So we are just setting up in this verse, we're just setting up that stage. And then in the subsequent verses, we'll go in the details. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. So this is the context. So one might be wondering when we read this verse, well, in one sense, well, everything that person is doing is material. Well, ghee is made up of ultimately from milk. Well, that's matter. The fire that is produced is also material. The work that person is performing externally appears like any other work somebody else is performing, so that is material. So you're saying this person is spiritual, but from an external perspective, he's just like us. What's the difference? So that is a dilemma over here. Well, we are in this world. That means we have to operate in this world. Yet we have to get out of it. So that's a dilemma. That one might question, well, if I have to be delivered out of something, then the means or the instrument that is used to deliver me should be of a higher nature. Just like if I am fallen in the well, I cannot crawl out of the well on my own. I cannot climb out. I need someone from the top to throw me a rope. So that person, if that other person who is trying to help me, if that person is also fallen in the well and is besides me, then that person cannot help. So the point is, the instrument that can deliver us should be of a higher nature than our own situation. Otherwise, how is it going to deliver? So the problem here is conditioned soul. Is we are entangled in material contamination. So we are surely to act in that material atmosphere. So everything is made up of the three modes of nature. So in a way, we cannot escape it. That was Krishna is saying, Mama Maya Duratyaya. You cannot escape it. Yet one has to get out of it. So how do we overcome that? So that's the challenge. So in the purport, Prabhupada is further explaining, is elaborating that dilemma. So process by which conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. So what needs to change is the consciousness. The change is always subtle. Just like, there's a corporation that's doing things. And a new CEO comes. Say the company is not doing well. Companies are, making a lot of losses. Now the CEO comes and it's not changing the business at all, and it's not that, hey, we are making, I don't know, software today and tomorrow we'll start making textile, right? And it's not changing the business. The business is remaining the same. The individual roles and responsibility of each employee will also not change when the new CEO comes and start to change the direction of the corporation, and then within few years the company is now profitable, right? So whenever there is a change in management, the day-to-day activities of individual employees don't change. But yet that person comes about and brings about change in consciousness, how we do things. And that makes a material difference. So the change is always subtle. By subtle change, one can bring about large changes. Just like, if you go to these modern day ships, on a cruise ship, traditionally you would have this wheel, that the captain would move to steer and change the direction. But now you have these huge ships. And I was on one of those ships and went a tour. They showed me. It's it's they were using a small just like on the mouse you have this wheel like a roller wheel. So there was a pin which is smaller than a nail. And just like some of the laptops, they have this red button in the center, right? And what they call, it's not like a scroll. uh, it's not exactly a scroll, but it's like a stylus. You apply a slight pressure on each side, and your mouse will move. So that kind of device they were using. It says the entire direction of the ship, this huge ship, can be controlled just by applying little pressure on a pin which is not bigger than a nail of a thumb. So the change, how did that come about? Any kid can do that. Any child can do it. So the cause, just by subtle change, we can bring about large changes. So that uh, so similarly, one does not have to drastically change one's life. Just by changing one's consciousness, by adopting Krishna consciousness, one can overcome the material atmosphere. So that is what is being described. So another example is for a patient who is suffering from the disorder of bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely the yogurt or the curds. So yogurt is a transformation of milk. When milk turns sour, uh, and it turns into yogurt. Now we all have some experience. If there is overindulgence of milk products, the digestive system is disturbed. but by consuming probiotics like yogurt, that can be restored. So here, the same energy which the same substance which was cause of the problem, uh, in its modified form, can be used to cure that problem. Like, just like if somebody is pricked by a thorn, you could use another thorn to remove the thorn which by which one is pricked, right? So in Hindi we have this saying "kaata kaate loha lohe ko kaatta hai," right? Or you use one thorn to remove another thorn. So the other example that is given is the electricity. The same electricity can be used for heating during winter months, right? So Maulik is in the southern hemisphere. It's the winter season there. Uh, and then you can use the electricity to turn the heat on. For us who are in the northern hemisphere, me and Yashesh, and it's a hot season. Well, in India, it's already monsoon now, but it's still hot over here. But you could use the same electricity to run an air condition. Right? The underlying energy is still the same, but how it is utilized is different. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in Bhagavad Gita. This process is generally known as yajna or sacrifices, simply meant for satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. So, in the Vedic culture, when the kings used to collect the taxes, of course, they would spend on public works, but a significant amount would also go in performance of sacrifice, like Maharaj Janak, uh, Rama himself, who is Supreme Personality of Godhead, where he appeared in the Raghu dynasty as a king. Every day, one of their duties is that they would just perform these large sacrifices. The performance of the sacrifices, the demigods, for satisfaction of Vishnu. When Vishnu is satisfied, the demigods are satisfied, and different the weather systems, the affairs of this world, which are under the authorities of the demigods, wind, fire, air, and there's so many other aspects which are nicely maintained. That's an outcome of those sacrifices, but ultimately it's coming from satisfaction of Vishnu. And when that is done, all the natural order is maintained. Just like the example that is given, if in a country where people are honest and they're paying their taxes, the administrators are also honest. They're using the taxes for the good of the nation. So that nation, when the nation becomes a priority, right, the needs of everyone are automatically taken care of. Everyone is paying taxes so that the country runs well. The politicians, the administrators, they're using the money properly. They're not corrupt. Then the nation progresses. And nation progresses, everyone progresses. So then he says, why I should pay taxes? Well, it's a sacrifice for the ultimate good. So similarly, in the spiritual consciousness, in a spiritual life, when everything is done for the satisfaction of Vishnu, including the demigods who are the agents who are the order carriers of Vishnu, they are also situated properly, then everything becomes perfect. But if everyone is thinking of their own personal gain, then it's a chaos. Just like the example that is given, a hand, if it says, I am not going to feed the mouth, I'm not going to feed the stomach, I'm going to consume the food on my own, that's not possible. The body will become malnourished because the body is not being fed. And ultimately, the hand will also lose its energy or potency, won't be able to act. The word Brahma means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body, which is Brahma Jyoti or the effulgence, which is the object of meditation for the impersonalists. That is also spiritual, because it is the spiritual effulgence of Krishna. Everything that exists is situated in Brahma Jyoti, or the spiritual sky, which has the spiritual effulgence. Everything is situated in that. But when the Jyoti is covered by illusion or Maya, it is called material. So when we talk about material and spiritual world, sometimes we've seen that uh, word appear many times in Srila Prabhupada's writing. Of course, he is translated in English, but there is Maya. So material world is considered as Maya or illusion. But Maya is of two types. There is a Maya of this world, which creates illusion, facilitates our forgetfulness of Krishna. In the spiritual world also there is Maya, which is called Yoga Maya. Yoga means to link, but that illusion brings us closer to Krishna. Illusion of this world, material world, that illusion brings us away from Krishna. Illusion in the spiritual world brings us closer to Krishna. How? And just like most living entities in the material world are not aware of the position of Krishna. Similarly, in the spiritual world, many of them, or most of them, or all of them, are not aware of the position of Krishna, in the sense that that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. They are not aware, and because they are not aware, they are brought closer to Krishna. They can think, "Oh, Krishna is my friend," so they can joke with him. Or their parents, those who are in parental affection, like Yashoda and Nand Maharaj, you say, "This is my child. I have to take care of him. If I don't take care, then what will happen to him?" And those those devotees who are in conjugal affection, they look on Krishna upon their lover or a spouse. Uh, and so by the potency of Yoga Maya, they are all made to forget the original position of Krishna. Because as long as they are aware, that intimacy won't develop. The modes of devotion in friendship, parental affection, conjugal affection, that won't be manifest. So but when that manifests, the devotees and Krishna can come in close, intimate association, and for that purpose they are made to forget. So actually, the entire creation is spiritual. There is no difference. So the entire creation, or the sky, the space, is full of spiritual effulgence emanating from spiritual planets. But there is one section, the 25% of that sky is dark, because there is a cloud that obstructs the Brahma Jyoti, and that cloud is that of Mahat Tattva, or the unmanifested 24 elements that we discussed, the Dravya by which this material world is created. Those 24 elements, they form this cloud which obstructs the spiritual light, and within that space are there innumerable material universes, in which there are different species of life, which is subject to birth, old age, disease, and death. So here where we have forgotten Krishna, but it's all part of Krishna's creations. In that sense, it's all spirit. We call it material because the consciousness is focused more on matter. The conditioned soul is trying to enjoy the matter. What are we trying to do? We're trying to enjoy the sense objects, different kind of things and possessions. And so our consciousness is material. Otherwise, everything is spirit. So as soon as we realize that, then we see everything is Krishna's creation, and then we see Krishna everywhere. Just like you go out in the nature, let's say, and you see so many flowers and fruits. People who have material consciousness will think of, how do I use it for my enjoyment? Someone of Vaishya mentality might think, oh, there are so many fruits over here, maybe I can pluck them and sell them in the market. A Kshatriya goes to the forest, it's the same forest, and he thinks, oh, there are animals over here, let me hunt. And one who is of some mode of goodness like Brahmana, I say, it's so peaceful over here, let me just chant, sit here and meditate. You see, but they're all trying to look at things for their own gratification in different ways. But one who is completely spiritual, he goes and sees Krishna everywhere. Oh, this is Krishna's creation, the fruits. He looks at the tiger, he doesn't think of hunting, things, oh, it's the same spirit soul that resides in this body, the same Paramatma that resides. And in this way, the realized soul is also seeing at the same things, but the consciousness, the perspective, the worldview is different. And so everything appears spiritual to that person because it is spiritual, which is a normal view that we should be having. But because of contaminated consciousness, when we think of everything in terms of our enjoyment, that consciousness is material. Jaisi drashti vaisi srishti. The world appears to us based on our vision. So what needs to change is the vision. That is what this purport is trying to say. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. All we have to change is our consciousness. We don't have to bring about any drastic changes in our life. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together as Brahman or the absolute truth. This is which is the literal translation of the verse. What was the verse was saying? As soon as the material veil is removed, everything appears spiritual, including the person himself. One sees oneself not as a body, one starts seeing oneself as a spirit soul, which is the truth. Then he sees that the work that I'm doing is spirit. The offering which I'm giving as a contribution in the sacrifice, dravyas, they are also spirit. The fire, the consuming agent is the fire. See, is also spirit. What is offered in the fire, the dravya, is also spirit. The process of consumption, which is burning, is also spirit. So once the consciousness is changed, and everything can be seen in proper perspective. So the absolute truth is covered by Maya. It's called matter. But the matter dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth regains its spiritual quality. So the other example that I had given is the money, right? So money, the income that one earns, if one pays the taxes, then that is all legal income. It's all white money. But if one does not pay the taxes, then it's all black money. One is not changing the business. He's still getting the same income, right? But then just the fact that whether one is paying the taxes which are due or not would qualify one incomes as white or black, right? Legal or illegal. So similarly, all the activities, which though they might be happening on the material platform, if they are dovetailed for the cause of absolute truth, they regain their spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting that illusory consciousness into the Brahman or the Supreme. See, only thing that needs to change is consciousness. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi or trance. Anything done in such a transcendental consciousness is called yajna or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or the leader of the performer, and the result of ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the supreme Brahman. That is a method of Krishna consciousness. Any questions on verse number 24? Okay. Yeah.
Jameen bhai, sorry.
Yes.
So when we say that, I mean, there is jyoti, I mean, basically a flame, and that flame is covered with the illusion, and that we can compare with everything and anything. I mean, what activities we are doing, and how we are looking at it. So like in a life, if we try and change our perspective, and then let's and think about, let's say, Krishna consciousness, and then you said that, you don't look at your enemy as an enemy, uh, or any activity which you are doing, but you don't, I mean, you're doing it for the god, and you don't do anything wrongly. So uh, I mean, when we are doing, like we discussed, I maybe in the past also, when you are doing parenting, sometimes it's good. Sometimes you see the kids and then you shout on them. Let's say if we think that as a Krishna, that they are a small form of Krishna, and then we are getting that enjoyment of parenthood, right? So all the times you cannot be lenient to them, that, oh, this is a form of a Krishna. Now, same way, I'm doing a work, and then I need to uh, like, it happens that I need to sack some employee. Basically fire somebody who is not performing his duties or her duties, and then doesn't qualify, and then there is no choice. You have to follow the certain rules and you need to fire them. But then by that way, I'm taking their like job, and then I'm taking away their livelihood and everything. So sometimes I do feel also guilty that I am not doing right, but I have to follow this, what organization has prescribed for me. So, and again, coming to the taxes, like, it happens that we do everything thoroughly, but I've been into situation most many times. You go to the passport office. Not nowadays, because nowadays it is very clear, but still, like, for the passport office, we need to get that police clearance thing, and then you need to go to the local police station. And it happened, I think, maybe 10 years back with us, and then you need to pay them at least 50 or 100 or 500, some amount, which I didn't like, but my father did it, and it happened, I think, 2 3 times. So, and when I asked him, he said that no, there is no choice, because the guy was also asking, and I was so angry that I don't want to do it. But that happens. So in that, at that all that point of time, I'm actually not following the right way. So, and that's where I get confused, that I'm not following the
Right.
Krishna consciousness, or any path which is right, and which takes me to the spiritual level.
Right. I know you'd asked this question earlier, and I believe I answered. But again, it's good to repeat again and again, because we it happens to me also. Unless we are constantly reminding ourselves of how we should approach, we tend to go back to our conditioned way of doing things. So I'll answer each of those situations. The essence of that is, again, you see, you don't have to change how you're dealing with the situation. You have to change your consciousness. So let's take the first example. You're saying the child, uh, if he, is not, it needs to be corrected, right? It's not behaving properly. So earlier you would chastise him, right? Now you're saying, because I'm Krishna conscious, I'm saying, oh, he's spirit soul, so then I should not chastise him. But if you, that's not the right application of the understanding, because now you're changing what you are doing. Earlier you're chastising, but now you're not chastising. That means you have changed the process. You don't have to change the process, we have to change your consciousness. So the proper consciousness is, well, earlier what might happen, I'll give you an extreme example, but many times when some parents, they just chastise, some, not all, they are chastised because they are frustrated with the child. And this is why the child is not doing what I am asking to. So there is a clash of ego, and out of frustration one chastises it. That means one is overcome by anger. Mm. On the other hand, one person who is situated properly in spiritual consciousness, he is not irritated, because one is overcome happiness and distress, comfortable and uncomfortable situation. But he's saying, oh, this child, what he's not doing properly, it's not about me getting frustrated. This is not a good consciousness or good attitude the child has. I have to correct him. I'm going to explain him politely, give him instruction, but he's still not listening. So now I have to show anger. Now the anger is in the control of that person who is showing the anger. I mean, that person might shout, that parent might shout, or will make a show of hitting, and that's enough for the child to understand this is serious, and the child can be corrected. And the next moment, the parent is back in its proper state. It means that the parent was never consumed by anger. But the display of that anger was needed in order to bring about the right action. So what was changed? The consciousness changed. He said, I am spirit soul. This person is a spirit soul. He has acquired a body. He needs to learn things. And I'm going to teach I'm going to teach my child what is the right thing to do. Right. Uh, Now there are people who are still not consumed by anger, but they are on a material consciousness. They say, oh, this is I am body, this is extension of my body, and I want my child to be materially successful. And they are able to control the anger to some extent because they have, they are not consumed necessarily by anger, even on a material platform. It's possible. But they are still not seeing the spirit connection. So even in that situation, one can transform and bring that spiritual connection. Well, I'm doing it not because it's an extension of my body, but it's a responsibility given to me to take care of that body, because the body is also Krishna's creation, not my creation. So that and it has to be raised nicely. Similarly, when you talk about paying, what was the other thing you mentioned? Yeah, firing someone. So punishment are given for the good also. So one, the consciousness that by taking away someone's job, that's a whole far left idea. That's why the extreme liberal idea is, well, there should be no capital punishment, right? That's the latest thing in the Western world, that no matter what crime one has done, we should be liberal. There should not be capital punishment. But traditionally, if you see Vedic culture, you look at the laws of Manu, you see the king should give proper punishment to the criminal with a proper spiritual consciousness, in the sense that suppose somebody has committed murder and one does not receive capital punishment, then after death, one will be taken to Yamaraj, and the punishment that Yamaraj will give would be even more horrible. So it is better for that person to undergo punishment now. In the example of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the courtyard of Nanda Maharaj, there were two trees, Yamala Arjuna trees, and Krishna as a baby, he is tied to a grinding mortar, and then he crawls and drags the mortar, which gets stuck between those two trees, and pulls the trees down. Out of the two trees comes the two sons of Kuvera, Manigriva and Nal Kuvera, and they are delivered by Krishna, and they go back to spiritual world. But the story is they were cursed to become trees by Narada Muni. So in the heavenly planets, being Kuvera is a treasure of the demigods, so he is very rich. So many times, even in this world, we see that princes or the children of rich people, they are spoiled. They are engaged in enjoying wine and women. So that's what they were doing. So in the heavenly lakes, they were completely naked. They were drinking liquor, and they were enjoying apsaras who were also naked. And Narad Muni passes by. The apsaras, they feel shy. They immediately cover their body and they'll leave. But the two sons of Kuvera, they're still, they don't cover their body. They're fully intoxicated. They don't pay respects to Narada. And Narada says, you are wasting your life. By your past karma, you got good bodies as children or the sons of Kuvera. So, in order to teach you a lesson for your benefit, I'm going to curse you to become trees. Uh, So that for their ultimate good, they were cursed. So, as a leader or a team member or a manager, you might have to take decisions of chastising someone or firing them, but then it's a hard way for them to realize their mistake and correct themselves, and out of that they would come out stronger and even better. And then you do it with that consciousness, yet you want all spirit souls to improve, to in terms of how they do their activities. So then there's no harm in doing that. Here Krishna is going to kill millions of people, but what needs to change is consciousness. And similarly, taxes, or you saying you want to get some work done. Yeah, ideally, we should not pay any bribe, uh, but sometimes it's just the way things are, right? That you cannot change things. suppose you don't give any money, then you would your work won't happen. The counter argument to that is, well, you're encouraging that kind of behavior, and so those who cannot afford the bribe, for them the work will never happen. So again, it's a complicated issue, that particular scenario of how you deal with that situation. And a couple of things you could do. You could report it to the higher authorities, but it's not going to help your immediate cause. Sometimes the higher authorities are also corrupt. Uh, so it is said there are four. If you see traditionally, you see in Western world, when you say there is not corruption, again they are well paid. You see the salaries in India, they are probably not so well paid, and so there are so many factors. We don't get into the details of it. But Chanakya Niti says that there are four kind of people can be controlled in four different ways, and sometimes you have to control or influence them to get your things done. Those who are greedy can be controlled by giving them material gifts. So in this case, that appears as bribery. Those who are foolish can be controlled by praise. You say them nice things, they get puffed up, and but foolish people will only get puffed up by praises. If you know this person is a fool, he likes to be praised, then you can control and influence them by praises. Greedy can be controlled by material gifts. One who is intelligent, you cannot, one who is really intelligent, you cannot control by giving them gifts. You cannot do praises, offer praises, because that person will immediately know that, oh, this is just trying to just flatter me. An intelligent person can be controlled by speaking the truth, no matter how unpleasant the truth is, even at the risk of putting our oneself, by revealing the truth. It might not be favorable for us on surface, and we might accept some mistakes. Say that person is intelligent, and instead of trying to bluff, you accept your mistake, and then you'll know this person is honest, and you'll actually appreciate. So an intelligent person can be controlled by speaking the truth, and those who are very angry and irritable can be controlled by tolerating their behavior. And one day they will realize, hey, every time I become angry, the other people, they get frustrated, and they also react in anger. But this person is, I'm seeing for a long time, he's able to tolerate. This person must be really good. And eventually he will start appreciating, and then you can influence that person. um, so according to Niti Shastra, sometimes you might have to do that. Of course, there's a larger conversation whether it's right. You are not doing out of your choice. Suppose you're flattering someone, but it's just part of your daily activity. So in this way, you can deal with these situations. Now, coming back to the original question, well, where is spiritual consciousness in that? So does spiritual consciousness, when we start seeing things as spirit, do we lose the distinction of what is right and wrong? Do we lose the distinction of the dualities? What is good and evil? Uh, is that what it means to be spiritual? Well, the answer is no. It's not that we lose the distinction. The distinction remains and should remain. Rather, a spiritually conscious person is able to even see subtle distinctions between good and evil that a materialist person might not be able to see. Sometimes people, so there are two ways you can overcome the distinction between the dualities. One who are fully ignorant, for them everything is material, right? So they are so much, ignorance is bliss, as they say, so they cannot make any distinction between good and evil. On the other end of the spectrum, those are completely transcendental. They only see spirit, and they only see good, they don't see any evil. uh, but those are very rare. Even if you see Krishna's example, he's complete spirit. When Putana came to kill him, he was just barely few days old. From an external perspective, of course, Krishna does not get old. And Krishna knew that this is a demoness and she wants to kill me. And so Putana poisons her breast and offers her breast to the child to suckle. And so Krishna closes his eyes for 1 second. There are many interpretations of why he does that, but eventually, in the pretext of sucking the milk, he sucks the life breath out of her. Putana dies. But because she was killed by Krishna, then Krishna offers her position of Mother Yashoda in the spiritual world. Why? He thinks, oh, she came to offer me milk. That means she is my mother. So she got the highest position one can achieve in the spiritual world. But what he did at the time, he punished her by sucking the life breath her out. But when he would suckle Mother Yashoda's breast, then he would suckle with love. So Krishna does not lose the distinction of what is good and what is evil. He has the distinction. But the negative he then overlooks. So he overlooked the fact that Putana had an evil intention. He said, whatever intentions, he offered me milk, I'll give her the position of a mother, right? So from an external perspective, we have to, we don't lose the distinction. We act according to what is needed, whether it is chastising a child or firing a incompetent employee. So the externally we do the things which are demanded by the situation, but the consciousness in which we are doing is different. Like Krishna, he had said, okay, she is a demoness, she has to be punished. That's the external way he reacted, but internally, okay, she offered me her milk, so her destination would be better. I'm going to liberate her. So when we fire, a materially conscious person, when a incompetent employee, he fires an incompetent employee saying, oh, this useless guy, I'm not able to extract enough work out of him or her, and it's not benefiting me because my projects are getting implicated, so my promotion is getting affected. This person does not serve my personal needs, is useless, and so I abhor that individual, I'm going to fire him. Yes, now compare that to a spiritually conscious person. He says this person is not sincere in his working, it's not a good kind of work ethic he has, uh, and it won't be sustainable in the long term. If one is does not have good consciousness even in material things, how can one can develop good spiritual consciousness? Ultimately, at some point in life, this person will revive his spiritual consciousness sooner or later. And even in spiritual world, there has to be some work ethic. I mean, it's just a moral thing, so I want that person to improve. I've tried to explain him in many ways. He's not improving. uh, it's not good for him, so I have to take this drastic step, right? Now externally it might appear that this person is getting fired because he's not helping the company make profits, which is also true. It's not that it's not true, we don't lose that distinction. uh, but then we minimize that, but your focus is more on the other aspect. We really want that person to grow, and it's a drastic step, but a drastic step is taken for the betterment. So you're not changing what you're doing, you're changing your consciousness and how you perceive things, and that might not come naturally, but by reading Srila Prabhupada's books on regular basis, slowly you'll start imbibing that consciousness, because all knowledge has to go through 4 levels. Remember, I mentioned the 4 levels. First is just hearing. We hear, but then we forget. And that's all right to forget. And so you might ask that same question again. But over a period of time, you'll start retaining. So at least now it's in your memory. Now it's in your memory, but you're not able to apply when the situation is there. And you say, I did not apply, but I should make an attempt. Then you might start applying, but you might start applying after the fact of the event. It might take you 1 week before you apply. But slowly over a period of time, you can, you're in a situation, instead of a week, you might start applying your learnings within days. Then the time will reduce to hours, then to minutes, then seconds, and then eventually it'll become your second nature, right? So it has to go through that progression. But what needs to change is our consciousness, and not, otherwise you can apply. If you don't have the proper understanding in name of spiritual consciousness, we might do the wrong thing. He says, oh, this is spirit soul, so I should not chastise, I should not fire. That is superficial. Krishna is not telling Arjuna, oh, you stop fighting. He says, no, you shoot arrows. So we don't have to change what we are doing or we are supposed to do. What we have to change is our consciousness. Is it good? Maulik?
Yeah, Jameen bhai.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's already 7, 5 more minutes. Maybe starting a new verse. We could take any questions anyone might have. Yes, Yashish, you want to say something?
Yeah, I have one question. So, you spoke about the nation and taxes, and about when everyone conducts themselves in a certain way. That I believe that concept of everyone comes from the fact that although the verses guide us for our own individual conduct, how we should conduct ourselves individually, still there is a mention and reference of doing it for the greater good. And I think the connect between these is established as that every one of us in our mind has that component which is distributed, which is the same for everyone in the universe. So everyone has a share of it, which is the common thing that connects all of us, which is also something we refer to as the divine or the Krishna consciousness. That in everyone you have a bit of the same uh, dharma and same the universal component towards which and which is what binds everyone, which is what makes us think that what we are doing for individual ultimately contributes to the greater good, and that's what motivates us for doing these things. Right? Otherwise, when you are doing something as an individual, the thought of the greater good, or for example, I'm a simple taxpayer, and my focus will only be the impact of those taxes on my personal finances. Right? For me
Right.
to think about the country takes some divine guidance like what we get in this. Uh, so how do I connect this with the fact that there is a recent realization and some literature around the fact that all these entities, nation and groups and even company for that matter, all these are just this imaginative realities. They are not real. The real is only that every individual is a silo, and the thought process, even though governed by the same elements, is very individualistic, and every attachment, everything that you relation you have with external world is a reflection in your own mind, right? We don't. It's not something uh, that is a common communication by some entity which drives the entire universe. It's not like that. There's a school of thought that everything that you get attached to is in your mind. You are attached to the image of the other person, or the
Yes.
other good, or even the nation.
Right.
But in reality, you are a silo, physically, physiologically,
Yes.
or even
True.
even spiritually. So how do I connect that with this philosophy about be motivated to do the right thing, which is good for, like in Gita also, it said that think about the society, think about what you pass on to the generations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's a good question. So first of all, when I gave that example, I was giving an analogy. So I was not
correct.
making a philosophical statement that we should serve our nation. But the example that I gave is that as one earns the income, but if one does not pay the taxes, it's like stealing the money. So its income is like is subject to fines and reactions. Similarly, the work that we do, but we don't offer the results to Krishna. The analogy is that you're not paying the taxes. I mean, it's not, Krishna is not dependent on our taxes anyways, but it's an offering of love. So analogy is not equal in all aspects, but there are some aspects which are common, and so I was just trying to make that correlation over here, and then that led to a question from Maulik about taxes. But the overarching principle over here is, I'm not making a philosophical statement of working towards the greater good of the nation. So having said that context, let me answer having make that clarification of why I gave that example. Let me answer the question that you brought up, which is true. So the Niti Shastra, not even Niti Shastra, Srimad Bhagavatam says that everyone in this world is interested in their own self-interest. Every single person. And any kind of affiliations of friendship is basically to serve that personal interest. Eko prashuyate jantu, eka eva hi praliyate, eko anubhunkte sukritam, eka eva cha duskritam. So a living entity is born in this world alone. He dies alone. He enjoys the good results of one activities alone, enjoys the bad results of one's past bad karma also alone, and is always interested in one's own self-interest. So that is absolutely true. And going through a regular spiritual progress, or through spiritual inquiry, one begins to question, at least especially in the human form of life, if one should come to the understanding of Atato Brahma Jigyasu. Well, who am I? Right? When you say self-interest, well, first of all, who the self is. And then one, when inquires, finds, well, this self is not the body, it's the soul. It's spirit. So what is the origin of spirit? If you think body, then that means, well, where does the body come from? Well, the body came from parents, and then you have affection towards your parents, which belong to a particular community or a caste or a race. And so that material identification keeps on extending, and that could extend to a nation. So such consciousness, material consciousness, will lead to false identification. So you have very self-centered identity, and then that can extend to larger misidentification. So in order to serve my personal interest, I have to serve the interest of my family. In order to serve my personal interest, I need to serve the interest of my caste or my community or a nation or a race. So ultimately comes down to self. So that even when somebody is doing their altruistic activities for the cause of the nation, one has its own self-interest in mind. Ultimately, because the identification of the self with the body is false, all other identifications with caste, community, nation, race, they're also false, right? But when one comes to the proper understanding that I am self, that self is the spirit, then what is the origin of the spirit? Well, the origin of the spirit is a supreme spirit. And one determines it, then one tries to revive that relationship with supreme, right? And automatically the interest of the real self, which is the soul, is served, right? So the underlying principle might be same, but the premise or the foundation is completely different. So in the Vedic culture, there is no concept of nation. The nations did not, I mean, there were kingdoms, the kings, right? The kings might be ruling over a particular region, but they were under still the authority of the supreme king of the whole planet. For instance, Yudhishthira performed Rajasuya Yagya. In order to perform Rajasuya Yagya, he has to send a Chakravati horse, Ashwa, all over the world with his own, and there is an entourage of army that goes with the flag, marking the flag of, say, Yudhishthira. So he's claiming to be the emperor of the entire planet. And either the kings of different parts of the world, either they accept Yudhishthir as the ruler, supreme ruler, under whose guidance they will rule the respective regions, or they have to challenge him and win over in the fight. So you see, though they are independent kings, they are still operating under an higher authority. And the king, the supreme king of the planet, is still subservient to higher authorities, the demigods, or the Vishnu himself. So he's a representative of the god, king, originally. So in this way, everything is channelized all the way up to the supreme. And even though so some basic understanding of that is there, as opposed to the current identification of nations, which is very exploitative. You don't have that higher understanding of God so much, though some constitutions do refer to God to some extent. So that's a completely different level. The consciousness is very different. So the idea of nation is very different, and they're all trying to compete against each other for power. But there's no one, like say America was a superpower, but now their influence is decreasing, and China is trying to fill in the void. Russia is trying to fill in that void, and they're kind of each competing against each other. but there is no one person or one leader that has an influence and authority over other nation, and on the basis of being representative of God, on the basis of dharma. So the rules and regulations, the laws are there, but the basis of the laws is whimsical. People vote, and then the bill becomes a law, right? So what was something illegal yesterday is legal today, and vice versa. And it's all based on sense gratification. How it serves the needs of the body. The needs of the spirit soul is not there, as opposed to everything based on dharma. A Kshatriya rules according to based on dharma. The codes of the laws are based on dharma. That dharma eventually allows individual, no matter what profession anyone has, but it allows that everyone to gradually make spiritual progress. So the interest is spirit. That's how the laws are made. For instance, the four varnas, which exist all over the world, though they might not be scientifically divided, the purpose of the four varnas is to gradually overcome the fruitive mentality to enjoy. We discussed this in detail in the past. And when the fruitive mentality to enjoy goes away, then they can perform. Okay, then if I'm not doing it for fruitive, then for what am I doing it? Right? Well, it's satisfaction for Vishnu. And the idea of sacrifice was there everywhere. You take the Roman culture, the Egyptian, the Mayans. Um, so it's not there in the modern governments, but if you see historically, the idea of sacrifice was there all over the world. So then that becomes the platform of dharma. So now you're coming back to your original question. Yes, everyone is acting in the self-interest. That is absolutely true. But when we identify what the real self is as the soul, then all other arrangements in terms of society, the divisions of labor, they are structured properly, and then the entire society is spiritually uplifted. But if the self is identified incorrectly as the body, then all other identification of caste, creed, community, race, nations, they are all based on that false understanding, and then it just creates more bondage instead of liberation. So that's the essence. I hope that answers your question, but if I missed something, let me know.
No, yes, very much it does. I think I'm much clearer on that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions? If there are no questions.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll take a break over here. We completed through 24. I think it's a good break point, because the series of next verses will talk about what are the different kind of sacrifices which are applicable to different members of the society as per their social order or spiritual order, whether it's a brahmachari, grihastha, vanprastha, or sannyas, or similarly whether it's a brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya. So we'll go that in detail in our next class. Thank you very much. All goes to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.